Hello and welcome back to the Roundup by News of the Week, the show where I, Jake Whitwell, summarise and explain the news, helping you to stay informed. Starting off with news on policy change then. First, I collected a few stories on the welfare bill, which I then put together. So the Standard reported that the PM has defended the welfare bill despite a climb down over PIPs, the personal independence payments. The threat of rebellions that we covered last week seem to have led to more revisions and U-turns within the policy, which basically means that now the changes to PIP's eligibility won't happen. Those changes won't come with this bill. The concessions from last week still stand, as do the increases in the employment assistance stuff, which basically were protecting old claimants and giving more support quicker. That's all still in place, but then there's also the added thing of now the main changes to the eligibility of PIPs aren't coming. This bill now is more or less just basically helping people get into work without the changes and the decreases to benefits. It's left the government with around a £5 billion black hole, because that's what these changes were supposed to save. LBC detailed that Rachel Reeves is poised to announce cash ISA changes. It's thought the Chancellor will announce changes later on this month, on the 15th of July, and that will come as part of the government's growth and competitiveness strategy. There's previously been talk of her wanting to strike a balance between saving and investing. With the current, she wants more people investing into things in Britain. The current tax-free ISA limit of 20,000 will be reduced to something like £4,000 or £5,000. That's despite people like the money-saving expert Martin Lewis calling the changes a mistake, and research from investment companies like AJ Bell saying that only a quarter of people would actually reinvest their money into something else, and that these cash ISAs make up a large proportion of British people's savings. ITV News reported on comment from the Prisons Minister, who said that changes to short-term sentences will be coming imminently. The government has been talking a lot about reducing the reliance on short-term sentences ever since the riots last autumn, which saw the release of people midway through their sentence. We've previously heard about the potential use of new technology to aid this change, and we've heard about improvements to electronic tagging and things like that. The Prisons Minister, Lord Timpson, Lord Timpson responded to a question of when the government will actually announce these changes, and said the changes will be imminent, but that the legislative process would need to be respected. The Independent detailed that ministers are planning to nearly double onshore wind farms in England by 2030. The announcement came as part of the government's onshore wind strategy, which would see the country's capacity for generation increase by nearly double, from 14.8 gigawatts to 27 to 29 gigawatts. The government said that doing this would create jobs, reduce bills, and help decarbonise the grid while improving Britain's energy security. This onshore wind strategy has come with 40 actions that have been announced, which include things like planning reform, building better supply chains, and upskilling workforces, as well as repowering old turbines. Anyway, that concluded the news I got on policy change. I'll move on to news on other politics now. In news on other politics then, HuffPost reported that the former Tory MP George Freeman has been suspended as the trade envoy over claims he took cash for questions. Mr. Freeman was trade envoy for Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore and Brunei, and has been the MP for Mid-Norfolk since 2010. It's been claimed he took money from the gas monitoring service GHS SAT as a paid advisor in return for questions from the company's director about the industry that they were in. Freeman referred himself to the watchdog, but did say he did not believe in the claim. He always respected the parliamentary system and upheld the code of conduct. LBC reported Pat McFadden has refused to confirm whether the total number of migrant channel crossings will decrease in the next 12 months. The Labour MP and Cabinet Minister refused to say that the numbers would decrease over the next 12 months. Instead, he offered an assurance that work is being done and that the numbers that were there currently are clearly unacceptable. The Standard reported that Nigel Farage has said well-known figures outside of politics want to join a Reform UK cabinet. He said that it was nonsense that ministers must come from a political background and must be from the Commons. He also suggested that this country should follow the US model of their cabinet. Well, it's worth noting that not all our ministers come from the Commons. Some have come from the Lords, but they have broke convention in doing so. For example, David Cameron became Foreign Secretary last year while he was a Lord. That did break convention, but it was still allowed. But Farage was talking about people outside of politics. He was mentioning that people that were running businesses could help run public finance in a business-like manner, which he thinks could improve the running of those public services. He also commented that he has been surprised by the sort of people that have been interested in a cabinet role and that have been talked to already. He said some of them have been well-known people but wouldn't say names. Regardless of the people he's talked to, it's important to note though some of the key differences between the USA cabinet system and ours in the UK. For example, in the USA, the people are selected to cabinet by the president. These people are generally experts in their field. That is because they don't really have to have a political function. They're not running departments like they are in the UK, and they're not setting out plans for legislation in the same way that they are in the UK. The experts in the field that you might see in this country come in in the form of advisors and spags, and not really cabinet ministers. They're people that support the cabinet minister in making those political decisions. But in this country, they're mostly briefed by these experts and then have to make the political decisions. I'm not trying to comment on which one's better, but in this system, that's why we don't have these experts in their fields. Some of them do become experts in their fields as they naturally would. Running a department like healthcare for a long time, you might learn some things that you probably wouldn't have known otherwise. But they're usually proficient in practice in politics, which gives them their own skill set, which is especially important in British politics. Politics Joe also covered Farage's interview and noted that he said same-sex marriages were wrong. In an LBC show, Farage was asked by a caller whether he supported same-sex marriages, an issue he previously opposed. In response, he called it a settled issue, but that one that he opposed at the time, but he did say that they've moved on. In the interview, he also discussed the recent changes to abortion and said that they were disturbing, and commented on a range of things like the topic we just covered. The Times detailed that Zara Sultana has quit Labour to form a new party with Jeremy Corbyn. Sultana, who is currently sitting as an independent in Parliament, voted against the government in a vote relating to the two-child benefit cap in August, has now formally resigned from the Labour Party. She's accused the government of wanting to make disabled people suffer and as being an active participant to a genocide in Gaza. Corbyn has said he's in discussion with various groups and people over starting a new left-wing party, which would be an alternative to Labour. Although it's not clear that Corbyn actually asked Sultana to be the co-leader of this new party, which there are barely any details about anyway. We don't even know the name of it yet. Sky News covered the suspension of a Reform UK MP, James Murdoch. Reform UK MP suspended himself from the party pending an investigation into business proprietary, which seems to be the legal running of a business and running a business inside social norms. The chief whip of the party, Lee Anderson, said that the party takes these matters very seriously and that Mr Murdoch was cooperating fully with the investigation. Mr Murdoch is the MP for South Basildon and East Thurrock, having previously worked in the banking sector. That concludes the news I got on other politics. I'll move on to stats and trends now. Moving on to stats and trends then, The Independent detailed a record number of migrants have crossed the English Channel in the first half of this year. The latest figures from the Home Office for June found that 19,982 migrants have crossed the Channel this year. As we're seeing so much this year as well, so much of the statistical things like the increases from last year or comparisons with previous years in general make for grim reading for the government's plan to smash the gangs and stop illegal migration. The record number is 48% higher than the figure from last year, and a Number 10 spokesperson has said that the number is clearly unacceptable, but that the problem was that these gangs have been allowed to embed themselves on an industrial scale in Europe, and that is the route to tackling it. The Guardian noted a poll has suggested that removing hereditary peers does not go far enough. Removing hereditary peers from the Lords would not go far enough for the public, according to a poll by YouGov, which surveyed 2,228 adults. Many members of the public supported a limited number of Lords in in the House. In fact, 71% of respondents said that the Lords should be no bigger than the Commons, which currently has 650 MPs. The Lords, I think, is 892. I'll check that. And so is currently substantially bigger. 79% also supported restrictions on appointments. To restrict the number of people that leave the Lords each year. Many thought that there should be reform over to how the appointments were made, with 56% of respondents arguing for the removal of hereditary peers and some sort of limitation on appointments. Also, 72% said that an independent body should be able to block the PM's appointments to the Lords. The government has pledged to remove hereditary peers and add restrictions similar to some of these in legislation. These would include things like a mandatory retirement age of 80, participation requirements, and the ability to remove peers who are disgraced or maybe unfit for their role. Finally, The Independent reported that polling has shown public support for the government has had its greatest fall in decades. Labour has had a 10-point decline since last year, with 24% with support sitting at around 24% in recent polls, that's down from 34% at the time of the last general election. A double-digit drop like that is unusual for a new government, and it's the first time this has happened since the 1990s with John Major. What's also different here is that the personal approval ratings for Starmer have fallen, and the share of support this time hasn't then went to the direct competitor, which in most people's opinion would be the Tories. It's went to minor parties like the Lib Dems, the Greens, the Lib Dems from the UK. Anyway, that concludes the news I got this week, so thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry this episode was delayed. If you found it useful, please remember to like, subscribe and comment, as it helps me make this every single week. If you thought I got anything wrong or that you have any suggestions for the future, please also don't hesitate to put them in the comments. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be back next week. Bye.